Hello, I'm Denny Somack, and this is The Rock Podcast. Now, I'm a rock historian, producer, and best-selling author, and have been conducting and collecting thousands of interviews over the years. I try and present great stories from my archives, and we also have newly recorded conversations. That's what we have today. I'm really excited because I got a hold of Steve Howe from Yes, who doesn't do lengthy one-on-one interviews very often. But I've known him for over 40 years, and he was eager to talk. He was very candid, really gave a lot of inside stories that I know you will not hear anywhere else. So, Yes has a new album out, Mirror to the Sky, and they'll be touring. Only the European dates have been announced, but if history is any guide, I'd be willing to bet you'll see them in America before, perhaps, the end of this year. So I want to just let things roll and hope you will enjoy listening to this as much as I had speaking to Steve. So let's just go with our recent conversation with the legendary guitarist, Steve Howe. Welcome, Steve. Are you at your home?
I'm at the studio. Yeah, I'm at the studio, which is part of our life, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
In the West Country.
What studio are you working at now?
My studio.
Oh, your studio. Okay. I think I've been there once.
Right. Yeah, I think you did.
Yeah. In fact, I think I was there with the guy from Ultravox. Does that make sense?
Right. Well, yeah, I was working with Billy Curry, but that was at his studio in London.
Okay. I got him confused.
Right.
My brain's a little fuzzy too.
Okay, don't worry. It's a long time ago. Anyway.
So we got a lot of stuff to talk about. You got a lot of stuff going on. Obviously, we're going to start with the new album, which Mirror to the Sky. It came out pretty quickly after The Quest, which is an unusual thing for Yes to do two studio albums so close together. But I want you to talk to me about the new album and a little bit about The Quest, because I had heard that somehow they were connected only in the sense that when you finished The Quest, you just wanted to continue going. So you ended up with a second album. So could you explain that?
Yeah, there's one, other little detail in there that obviously made it work, was that we were doing The Quest and, we were doing more material really than we needed. And it got to a point where I said, well, look, to be expedient, we'll pick the tracks we're actually going to use, and anything else we'll just have to leave because, we want to get this all done. So everybody agreed, and we left 2 10-minute tracks that weren't like detailed. They had all the guide parts and they had some shape. So they're both 10 minutes. So we finished The Quest and then waited a while. Of course, you do all the mastering, and then there's the release date, and the album's coming out, and we're all excited. The Quest is coming out, and so I suggested to Thomas that, in fact, were he and Sonny interested in there being another record, and he was very surprised, and he didn't know about the 2 other tracks. We had no reason to tell him that. I think I'd mentioned that we had other things, that they were a bit acoustic, which was partly true. So basically, when he said, well, how do you feel about it? I said, well, I think the band would just like to continue, So we had a gap, between actually mastering and finishing off the Quest. And then a few months passed and the release date came along. And then, as I say, Thomas got an approval back. So we basically, while that was coming out, we were starting to look back at those 2 tracks, which became Luminosity and Mirror to the Sky, because the Mirror to the Sky got expanded. It wasn't called that at the time, but it got expanded with some other ideas, and it's grown to be the title track. So, it's been a nice development. So yeah, we got on with the recording, much like we were with The Quest. In other words, the old days, we drove ourselves nuts for like 2 months, 3 months in one time zone. Here's the record, make the record, like crazy guys, and that was the only way you knew how to do it. But of course now we can make a record over a year where some months didn't do anything much, or we were working at home studio, and then we had the HQ studio, which was my idea of working with Curtis Schwartz, a guy, great engineer I've been working with for years. He's a musician, producer, engineer. So basically he's our go-to engineer, and he kind of has all the stuff coming in his studio, and he's got all the gear and stuff. Since I don't record on a computer, I record on a hard drive, but it's really like recording on tape more than anything else, which is how I like it, because it's how I know how to do things. But anyway, his place, the sky's the limit, you know, and that's where we go to when we're developing and bringing in files from, you know, the bass from LA or something, you know, the drums. But basically the bass and drums kind of come on later when we basically, well, Billy often's provided a track with his bass on already as one example, but where he hasn't, then we'll comp parts in, and then we start flying it around, you know, and gradually, well, we get opportunities to meet in the studio in HQ. It's near Brighton. It's not far from where Roger Dean lives. That's why he comes and visits sometimes.
Right.
So basically, it's really convenient. And so we just polish up the tunes, and then we leave it for a month, and we come back and we do another few days, and somebody else has done something, and there's a new song, blah, blah. You know, so it's just like a kind of evolving. There's no regular pattern about it. It's just when we've got something else to really work on, then we'll reconvene, if you like. But I do a lot of reviewing here at my studio, where obviously if I spend a few days on tracks, you know, I come back and then I leave it for a few days and do something else, and then I run around a bit, and then suddenly go, oh yeah, I'll listen to that. And when I hear it, then it's a review. You know, I mean, I can't help but go, oh yeah, but that's too loud, or we need another one of them, or that's got to come. You know, you start developing ideas even if you're not actually in the studio.
Right.
So that's how we did this through last year, leaving a big gap for UK tour, Japanese tour, American tour of 45 shows. But we thought we might finish at Christmas, but we didn't. So we went into January and did all the, you know, special mixings and 5.1 Dolby Atmos. We did all that, you know, in January really, and I think we just delivered it in February. And so it is very fresh, but you can see how leading off with two quite big tracks from the Quest aided us in the momentum. Not really just, we weren't looking for time, but we had the momentum of knowing that we had some more music which was going to be developed to the way that we liked it.
Right. Now, I know you dropped a couple of singles already. Isn't today or tomorrow the official release date of the album?
I believe so, yeah. And also we've just released Circles of Time, which is really the ballad on the album, if you like, which is a remarkable song of John's. Yeah. And that's come out with a video that's coming out tomorrow, I think. So it's all in sync, I think.
So let's talk. I know, you know, the pandemic threw everybody off, and of course you had to cancel a couple of tours, and there's reasons for that. But now the tour is set for the 23rd of May of 2024. Is that correct? At Bridgewater Hall in Manchester?
Yeah. The UK dates have been announced. So that's part, we're doing things before that, but we'll come back to that. You know, that we've announced the UK dates because we got the Albert Hall and we just went like, this is the time to do this. And now before that, it's going to come a European show, European leg. That will cover some of the territories, not all of them, some of the territories that we missed this year. So in that way, we're kind of fulfilling our European and UK responsibilities, and that's going to be.
Yeah, you mentioned the Royal Albert Hall. That's a big deal. You've played there a number of times. Do you remember the first time as a member of Yes that you played the Royal Albert Hall and how you felt?
I do. Well, I played there before, but as a member of Yes, the first time I played was on the I'm Butterfly tour. And I think it was the end of the tour as well. And I tell you, we got on there and we were scared. You know, it was so intimidating because I'd played there before and it was quite exciting, but you know, it wasn't really of this ilk. But this was a really keen show. I'm Butterfly were selling well. Yes, we're like a new band. We got on there. And I think it was pretty tantalizing. It's got a different kind of sound. Back then, it most probably had less sound buffers and things. So it may have felt a bit like maybe this sounds dreadful, but you know, you just got to believe that you're so lucky to be on those boards where so many great musicians have played before. So yes, I do remember it. I remember things were so different back then. You know, it was smoky. You know, you didn't need smoke on stage because the place was. But anyway, the whole thing was kind of like of its time, 1971. But I played there before in 1968 and maybe
who'd you
another.
play with before in '68?
I played with that group Bodast that I came, but it was before Tomorrow I was in. Wasn't it after Tomorrow? God, I'm getting mixed up with my career. I've never done that before. Syndicats, In Crowd, Tomorrow, Bodast. Yes. So Bodast came after, and it's a funny story if you want to hear a brief one. And that is that we were playing as an opening act really on a show that I think had Chuck Berry. Well, I knew it had Chuck Berry. I don't know whether the Who were on the same night, but it was called the Rock Proms or something. It was a fairly big disaster. So this is in 1968, as I remember. And or could have been 69, but basically what happened was we got to the rehearsal, and that was when I walked on to Albert Hall and stage and thought, my goodness. And we were just like a fairly pokey startup band, called Bodas. Nobody knew us, and we were fairly nervous, I guess. But basically, Chuck Berry walked out and said, well, you're my backing band, because we did know that. So we were going to be Chuck's backing band. So the funny thing was, he comes out and goes, okay, well, I'm Chuck Berry, but he points at me and says, but we don't need you. To me.
Oh, boy.
We don't need you. So I thought I was just going to like chug in the background, follow, when he moves up the chord, I'll go up to the next one. But no, he didn't want me on stage. But to compensate for that, what I did was in the interval, I went to his dressing room and I knocked on his door. And he said, yeah. He said, Chuck, it's Steve, the guitarist, So I'll come in. And I took my 175 guitar into him. I said, Chuck, what do you think of this guitar? And he looked at it. I saw his face go. And he went, yeah. And he went, wow, this thing's great, great. Oh, this is great, So, I mean, I knew I had a great guitar, but when Chuck did that, so he's one of the only, Martin Taylor was played my guitar, and Chuck Berry, I don't think anybody else really has, except a Russian border officer played it once, much to my horror. Can you imagine? He dragged the guitar.
Wait a minute. You got it. There's a story there, right?
Yeah. A Russian customs officer, after delaying us for an hour looking for something called something, hidden somewhere. He searched the Mercedes completely. And then he looked at the guitar. I said, that's my guitar. I said, don't touch my guitar. I was like, well, I don't really want him to touch it, but if I said to him, don't touch it, he's still going to touch it. He opens the guitar and actually picks it up. And I go, very careful, be very, very careful. I'm like going the horror of one of the worst times with my guitar experiences, besides a few with British Airways. But basically, he put it back in the case, and the guy did actually hold it. So, to qualify the true history of how many other people have played my guitar, besides people who've maintained it, of course, most probably played it a bit. But I've been very possessive. Can you believe that? A few minutes with Chuck, 10 minutes with Martin Taylor, and a Russian security guard. Oh, dear.
So you've done the tours before where you've done complete albums and everything, but this tour is going to be called what?
Well, basically, it's called the Classic Tales of Yes tour. Now, the reason is that, it is about time we thought about Tales, but we're not doing anything terribly conventional. It's not an album series tour. It's not branded album series, which we've done many, many times, and we love doing that. But we want to do our show. We want to kind of put our show slightly in a different way, the way we're coming forwards and the music we select and how that music drives through a show. So we're dreaming up a show that does include some new music, because I think Mirror has been warmly received. So we're going to play something from Mirror to the Sky. Right. But also, we're kind of thinking about what else we can do, but we can't give much away at the moment.
Are you gonna be telling stories behind the songs as you go along in more depth than you have? I mean, is it more of a songs and stories tour?
No, I don't think I'm ready for that. No, I mean, I like the band talking on stage. I mean, John and me do most of the talking, and I think that should be kept to a minimum.
Yeah.
I like shows when I see a band come on and play a song, play another song. Nothing gets said. Just we're here for the music. Let's play the music. So when we can do that, I think now when we've got transitions, like I know I've got to change a guitar or somebody's got to do something. Obviously, it's useful if somebody fills in the gap, and that's where John and I kind of try and pave it out a little bit. He might be getting a guitar, so I've got to talk. But basically, I'm happy to talk, but no, I don't think I'm quite ready for that. But who knows? It's an idea. I wouldn't say no, but I don't know if it's this tour.
Are you going to include any Asia tunes?
I think one night, yes, did play Heat at the Moment. I think that is a fact. So, it might have been, when John passed away, actually. I can't quite remember, but hopefully somebody knows. No, it's an interesting idea. We did think about playing ABWH, because quite often in the compilations of Yes, Rhino and Warner Brothers, in their wisdom, I think, kind of thought, well, it's not really that different. Let's just put it in there, and we did. But doing Asia would be a little bit unusual, but it's almost like what Asia did.
Got two members of the band, so.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. That when Asia reformed, in 2006 and went out on tour in 2007, we did a leg of touring, maybe a year of it, where we were doing like what we called a career tribute kind of tour, where we did Roundabout. And so Asia were playing, and we did, fanfare and all this, and we tried a couple of
King, I think you did too, right?
Yeah, we did video as well, which was kind of like really quirky, of course. But I don't know. Again, I don't know if you should ever say no to something.
Right.
But I wouldn't want to pull a yes round to Asia unless there was a lot of willingness. But things happen, and things come around, and things can happen sometimes that you don't expect.
I want to ask you, because I know it was a couple of years ago, but the 40th anniversary of the Drama album came around, and people are in different camps about it. I happen to think the album was great. I don't know if you remember, I was at Townhouse Studios when you were recording that. We were working on an NBC radio special. But what are your thoughts now about Drama, and what songs from Drama do you think you might play?
Well, okay, we're going to play something from Drama, but I can't tell you what it is. But all I can say is that there isn't anything on Drama that I don't love. There's nothing. There's no. I mean, all of it. I adore that record. It was really challenging to make, but it wasn't difficult in the sense that all the previous albums have been difficult. Mm-hmm. We were kind of set free, a bit like we are now. We're kind of set free, thinking, well, we got to steer this, just get on with it. Shut up and get on with it. And so there was a lot of musical opportunities, obviously having Trevor in the band was great and things like that. So to me, the way it had all the traditional approaches of how Yes would construct a record, but the difference was Jeff Downes and Trevor Hall were nothing like John and Rick. So there wasn't just one guy coming in going, oh, I think I'll change Yes a bit by doing it like Patrick did when he came in. He changed Yes because he came in and went, oh, we did all that stuff, which was marvelous. And basically this was much calmer and more determined. Chris was a great person for determination, and he was always very determined to get through things and work out the problems. But so basically, that is a joy, that whole record from the to the very end, Tempest Future. I mean, we had that structure of Tempest Future pretty well mapped out before Jeff and Trevor came in.
That was left over from the Paris sessions?
I don't really think it was. There's a lot of theories. Sometimes people have played me something and I go, oh yeah, is that really true? But certainly it was because of the three of us working for a few weeks on our own that we maybe dragged that out of something. But I wasn't aware of that, because what we got together was a kind of manic, and it is very, very fast. The tempo on that tune is remarkably fast. And basically it's a very exciting concept to start really where you plan to continue, where it really does cook, so I think the whole album is fantastic, actually.
Yeah.
I can't really fault it. I really do love it. Yeah.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, I think Machine Messiah is in your list of top 10 Yes songs.
Yeah, it is, because one thing, when I listen to it and when I play it, it seems endlessly longer than 10 minutes. I mean, it's got so much density in it. There's so many things, and they're all very exciting. Yeah. So again, you see, like John comes in and does some acoustic guitar. John Davison has done on The Quest and Mirrors of Sky. Same with Trevor. You know, we had some of Trevor's chords in the middle. Gene, 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 Gene. He's doing something, and that was how involved we all were. There was lots of sharing, and it was a great. I mean, touring was a lot harder and a lot more problems than making the record, actually. But of course, we were in the mode of making records, much like Yes were when we went from The Quest to Mirror. You know, we kind of, after the Paris tapes disaster, that was just such a mess, you know. And there was a resurrection, you know, in this little place called Red Ann Recorders, which is a rehearsal room and a studio. And we just played in this tiny little room. It's actually almost not any bigger than the room sitting in, you know, but we just hammered away in there. So I'm just rattling on really about the fact there was something going on before we got Trevor and Jeff, but boy, did it kind of elevate and twist nicely when it did come in. So very nice record.
So last time I actually saw you, I think was in Philadelphia on the 50th anniversary tour.
Oh yeah.
You had Tony Kaye was there, Patrick was there. You had 10 members of the group all in one place. How did that make you feel?
It was beautiful. It's a beautiful thing to do. That it just shows that when harmony and friendship and work can get balance, you know, this is a wonderful industry to be in, you know, and you meet some great people, and years later you get back with them, and it's nice. But basically, it's usually the people that you've stayed in touch with quite a bit, and somehow Tony has just always been around Yes, you know, for many years, and this was a great opportunity to give him you know, a gig to do it. And similarly, we did with Trevor Horn. You know, we would done many shows where Trevor's either sung Tempest Future, or did we try something else? I think we did. So basically, we like to do that, but it has to really feel right, you know, to share the stage. It doesn't often feel that right. But certainly what we don't want to do is cause commotion or doubt about where we are. So we've always kept a very, you know, sort of level-headedness about it.
Well, I remember Chris always used to tell me that Yes is more of an idea and a concept than a band. It doesn't matter. You're playing Yes music.
Yeah.
So I know you generally feel that way. And I'm going to ask you to make some comments about Alan, but before that, what are your reflections on Chris? Now you've had a period of time.
I couldn't do it justice. You know, we spent years working together, fighting some of it, but fighting not because of personalities, but because of what we thought was worth fighting for, which was generally music. Right. And you know, so no, captivating when I went to play the audition with Yes, and Chris was there, you know, with his twangy bass and everything. I thought, Jesus, this is going to be hell, but let's get in, you know, let's get into this, because everybody was so technically proficient, but also creative. And I think that's the way Chris continued. He never stopped. He never really. He never put anything in front of his bass playing. You know, when it came to it, his bass playing was what he stood and fell by. You know, he would always make it his trademark. You know, and sometimes it would be an obsession, like it is with us all. And I think the other day I was playing a couple of Yes songs, considering them for the live shows and things, and the bass was so loud. I suddenly remembered, like, well, it must be that Chris was there going, yeah, let's have the bass even louder. So there were some wonderful moments of how Chris could inspire, and you know, but it took patience, because he was a bit slower. He would take a long time to do a great job, you know. So you knew the job was going to get done. It just take a little bit longer. So he could also be very charming, very persuasive. Steve, by the way, have you you know, have you heard about, you know, he was also very he moved in his own sort of way, his own sort of space, but a lovely charmer. And of course, you know, we were friends from 1970 all the way through. I mean, sure, ABWH shows you that Chris was unpopular with the members at that time, and we let him be for a while. But basically, by the time Keys to Ascension came along in 1995, so I was working with Chris all the way through there till the end.
I remember Chris telling me on a number of occasions, I know it didn't necessarily happen, but he said, when we get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I would like all 21 members that have ever been in the group to appear. Did he ever mention that to you?
Quite often, and wouldn't he have been disappointed? I mean, he would have been thrilled that we'd been inducted and he'd been inducted, blah, blah, blah. But his goal was the same as what we were hoping for too, that every ingredient of Yes members would be represented. But I'm sure I'm not the first person to say that's not how you can do it, because their model, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame reputation stands and falls really on what they design for that show. And if they want somebody in, they'd like them in, please, very much. But I found them wonderful to work with, by the way. Really nice people, and I've got nothing but admiration for them. But they do have a persuasive way of saying, well, this is the way we see it. But the other thing was, there's lots I'm not going to say much, about it.
Well, but, tell us about, I know it's been a couple of years now. Tell us about on that night, how you felt, because I was there. Everybody gave their speech. I know Rick talked too long and told too many jokes, but overall, how did you feel?
I think I always feel a sense of achievement when I get through something very, very difficult, and it was pretty difficult. It needn't have been, but I think what happened was, even after the performances, it got continuously more difficult, even though it shouldn't have. I mean, after the performance, that should have been it. Okay, the slate is clean. Let's move forward. But of course, we got roped into lots of interviews, and in those interviews came all these crazy moments when people were saying things that weren't, consistent with one another, things like that. But I mean, look, in the end, what is it? It's an award, and it's great. It's nice to get it. I think we're all very proud that we did get it. And going back to what you said about Chris, he of all people felt that the industry had never really shown us even a thumbs up, let alone a hip hip hooray. So Chris always felt there was something missing from the way that, yes, I mean, it might have been quite influenced by the Rolling Stone magazine, that their attitude towards us for about 30 or 40 years was yes, prog band, sort of
There's
like a
prog
side
bias there by Jan.
Yeah, we were there a little bit and not really appreciative. And Chris was right that they didn't appreciate us. But that's a dangerous thing to expect, appreciation. If you get some, then soak it up and enjoy it. But you were going to ask me about Alan, of course.
Yeah, I want you to give a few comments on Alan, because it's obviously more fresh in your mind.
Absolutely. Well, of course, we were talking about drama, and drama, as I said to him when we came back to play the drama album, I said, that's some of your most powerful drumming. It was a great time, and it was a wonderful time for him. So that was where you could say he really came together, but he had to come together really quick for Yes. And as you can see, on Going for the One, on so many albums, he always rose to the occasion. So we became good friends. We were actually partners in a health food store before they were even really that popular, which wasn't very successful. But basically, our music was together, and even though we didn't play in the 80s, we touched base a little bit. But obviously, once the Union tour and the other things, I was back more in his camp, by 95. As Rick had done as well, by going back with the Keys to Ascension project, and then Alan and I spent all those years, and yeah, I mean, there were just we did so much work together again, and we had a lot of fun. I mean, there was a lot of fun to have in the 70s, which was like a splatter gun sort of fun. You didn't know what you were in for, which roadie was going to go crazy, or which private jet you're going to travel on next, or it was all kind of like, what's happening? But by the time the 90s, everybody had to get into their pattern, how they worked. And, I was doing a lot of touring by road, and the guys were mixing their methods, So and then I became,
you were doing your own car thing, right?
I
Back then.
was, yeah, I started doing that with Asia fairly rapidly. I found that that was the way it suited me best to tour. And I'm really pleased to see the guys, as opposed to spending all day with them in uncomfortable positions and, you know, just needing a gap almost, you know.
Right.
But anyway, where were we? I know we were heading to Alan, but you keep putting something in front of Alan.
Yeah. Well, I'm just, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
it's different now, but
yeah, I know. What I should have done is say this. So as the 2010s and 2015s went on, you know, the pressure on Alan got pretty hard. So that's when Jay Shellen was able to dep for him sometimes and do parts of the show that were taking a big load off Alan's. So he was never going to give up. Alan was always going to go on until he couldn't provide anymore. And basically, he was a total committed musician. You know, he'd given all that time from 1973 onwards, to
right.
Yes. Really, he didn't do a lot of side projects, and he couldn't find time to do much more than Yes, because he gave his all. So yeah, we all loved Alan. He was a charming guy. He was friendly. She was very warm and very special human being.
Now, when you joined Yes in 1970, you really helped change the sound of the band, basically a little bit more acoustic that. And you also did what many consider to be the real breakthrough, which was the Yes album. And I just want to ask you about a couple of songs, because I know your top favorite Yes songs, and in doing the
Well, that
research.
changes. That may have changed, but
Yeah, well, you're here to set the record straight. I mean, I remember on the list when I would ask you about this, you would say Starship Trooper was one. So make a couple of comments.
So yeah, I mean, Starship Trooper is an epic. I mean, it became even more epic as it went on stage, But if you look at the recording, it's a beautiful recording. But basically, I recorded that with a clean guitar sound. It had no phasing or flanging, because in those days you had to commit to something you liked. You really liked it,
Right.
and you didn't know about flanging or what was going to happen. So basically, I had a clean guitar, and that meant that when I affected it added that one of the quirky things about the tune that it's got anyway. And we had some good parts. So I mean, in those days, the rehearsals were never wasted. I mean, the rehearsals about learning parts, getting a part that you could reproduce and move along. So when that part came, when that song section came again, you could do it, but maybe you do it different now. Maybe the second time you do it, you do something more interesting. And so basically, one of the beautiful things about it was that it showcased the contributions of the three of us. So John really wrote most of what you call Starship Trooper at the beginning, and then when it gets loneliness is a power that we, and that's one of Chris's ditties. And then you do go back to Starship Trooper again, really, with all the
Right.
Talk to me of summer's long winter's morning, da, 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 da. And then you get to Worm, which is what I wrote. Now, I've written that with the group Bodas, which I think we mentioned earlier, or it was at my previous interview. Bodas, yeah. So basic Nether Street on there has me going do 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 the same part. Now, the reason I'd like to get the opportunity just to say that, as far as I knew when I did the Yes album, that those recordings of Bodas were never ever going to be heard, and you had no idea that they would be reissued or re-released 10 years after they were recorded, which they were. I mean, in the end, I helped them be released by mixing them with Gary Langham. And basically, so I had the idea, but what I didn't have was the way Yes arranged it, which was to start with very little, Mm-hmm. Just the guitar, ding, 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 and gradually kind of build. Then the bass comes in, big bass pedals. So the whole thing kind of builds, and that was the beauty of what became Worm, which was a German word. Worm, something like this. I don't know how the hell it got that title, but we were stuck for titles. Now I'm never short of a good title, but then it was difficult finding a title. But yeah, so Starship was really, and the way we mixed the end, I can remember Eddie and I working out, we had 2 guitar tracks, and fortunately this one was good. Oh yeah, this one's good now. Oh, that one's good now. And we just like A-B'd them as the tune went out, and I had a lot of fun. So Eddie Eddie was already starting to kind of make things, when we imagined them, Eddie would make them possible. And Starship Trooper is a good example.
Also on the list, yours is No Disgrace. Again, these are the 4 longest songs I'm going to ask you about, obviously.
Right. Okay.
They got lots of story in it.
Yeah, I think a lot of Starship Trooper was written in the studio. I mean, not written, but we worked on it in the studio. We created it. You know, Your Move and a Starship much more cleverly produced, say, than well, certainly what Yes had done before that. But when Yours in No Disgrace was the sort of signature tune of my arrival in a way, or that, you know, the Yes album era. You know, you got your you got that, and you know what it is. That's Yours in No Disgrace. Right. And that was a very collaborative tune. It's credited to Yes, all the Yes members, and everybody wrote something in there, you know. And basically, we were in Devon, where I am now, and we were basically young people finding unforetold freedom in being away from the city and away from touring. And right. So we spent a couple of months, you know, writing the Yes album. And Perpetual Change, you know, that was another great tune. But the Yours in No Disgrace, yeah, that was our most kind of witty number, if you like. When I mean musically witty, you know, that, you know, the way it came about was almost uncanny, and it wouldn't have come about like that if we hadn't all been together. So you know, this is the argument. You could say, oh, let's go back to the old days and sit in a room and drive ourselves mad for 3 weeks and write a few songs. Yeah, or you know, we don't do it like that much anymore. But it doesn't mean we don't get together, but in a way, well, we do partly collaborate on the structures of songs still. But in those days, it was all about a Revox recording. You know, some Revox going around at 7.5 IPS, you know, with a recording that you cherished, because in fact it was the only clue you had to what that song existed. And most of it was on cassette, actually, you know, just a one button cassette recorder. But anyway, I don't know how to describe the construction. We had the ingredients. We had a percussive intro, and then we had a thematic melody, the da 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 da, and you know, it gave me a chance to kind of find different ways of using delays where the guitar sounded a bit more kind of boppy, and there I was, see, coming through with a clean guitar sound. And that's what I did, was muck around with what the guitar was. Much before that, a lot of records, you know, it was fairly stable. The guitar came in, and at the end it went out, and it wasn't any different any time. But I threw in let's have an acoustic here, let's have that, you know, and giving the 10-minute track, and particularly the guitar solo out of the kind of ding ding stops. What happens after that is pretty much how I wrote, you know, it's terrible cliche. Oh, it's how I originally wrote it. But yeah, I mean, that's what I had. You know, I had that idea of, you know, it was guitar break. Had this, and everybody just said, okay, we'll do that, and that was it. You know, but it took the arrangement and the skill, particularly with Chris. I mean, when we had most of the structure implemented what Chris did, but not when we got to the latter part where Chris invented the do 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 do, or he took one of the patterns I was using, and he kind of developed it into a fantastic bass. So Chris was a great believer in having really solid structure for improvisation. He didn't mind how long I went on for, but he didn't want to be jamming as well. He didn't do that. Chris was not really a jamming guy. Right. He liked structure, very, very powerful. He knew where he was. He could deliver that. He could have his twerks, you know, his quirks and little twerks in it. So that song, Bill once said to me about that song, he said, I wish I'd known what you were going to play in the end, and I might have played something different. I said, no, Bill, I played what I played because of what you played. You know what I mean? You made it possible for me to jump on. And that's the jazzy bit, or the sustained guitar. As interesting, another point on Starship Trooper is that there's a note on there that took us 3 hours to play. I mean, let's say we had a few smokes and a cup of tea during that 3 hours, but I was trying to get a note that lasted, and it wasn't easy in those days, you know. And there's a long note that happens. I can't even describe it now. After the bass feature, there's a nice bass feature in the beginning of Starship Trooper, instrumental bit where Chris climbs around a lot. I come in the background with a fade up long note. I tell you, it took 3 hours to get that note to play. You used to get halfway through and it go, I'm not again on the tape. Anyway, silly bit of trivia. Back to yours, Disgrace. It's one of our cornerstone tracks. I mean, it says the Yes album all over it because it opens the Yes album, but it's also rings of the thematic lyrical. Look at the lyrics on that. Very, very powerful lyrics. And I don't know if it's well known, but there may have even been another writer on that song that wasn't credited. So, but you can work that one out.
So
But
that brings us to Roundabout, which you co-wrote with John. And
mm.
you wrote that, you were in Scotland at the time?
Yeah, well, we were, but it says something kind of sweet, great about it. Yeah, we were on tour basically, and John and I kept getting together after the shows or on the day off, after the travel day. We'd sit with, he'd have a guitar, I have a guitar, we got a cassette recorder and a few other ingredients, and we just like muck about. We called, what have you got? Have you got something? Or John might have something on his mind, and we start. So yeah, Roundabout came through a lot of those sessions. It was a big song to write, and when we presented it to the band, we had pretty much about 3/4 of it, in the sense that we did like the way we were, the ideas we had so far. But of course, they did a bit more expansion. It was a lot of fun using the studio, not as we did in the Yes album, which was like that reproduces what you can do in the studio, but also what we do on Fragile is what you can't, or what you can only do in the studio.
Right.
In the sense of the backward piano and things like that, and the sort of array of overdubs and techniques that we use to get the tunes down. So Roundabout is our most classic, most well-known tune from the 70s. So I love it dearly. I love the full version, but the single version got us noticed. So they could have asked us to do it, and we could have done it maybe better. But basically, they took the big bits out that they thought they needed. And
this is Atlantic we're talking about, correct? That did that.
The edits in Roundabout. Yeah.
And when you first heard what they had done, did you have any idea it would be a hit?
Well, you don't know really. No, of course you don't know. There's no guarantee. But it showed that they were trying. I guess they wanted to show. We did go there and bang our feet on the floor a bit at Atlantic. So you did well on the Yes album. Can you even do better on Fragile? And they said, well, we love Roundabout, and here's the edit. So it was kind of like a team, good team. Almond Erdogan was just great to work with.
Yeah, tell me this is the 75th anniversary of Atlantic Records coming up. Talk to me a little bit about Almond Erdogan and what he was like and his influence. Because I'll tell you one thing, he told me on a number of occasions, he would go see Yes, and he would see them multiple nights. And he said, the thing I love is I go every night, and it's like a painter and his palette. It's going to be different every time I see them.
Yeah. Well, we're very lucky to have Amit's interest, support, and musical ear, for him to see a few shows and notice the difference. I think he liked the improvisation, that we included in our show. Although it was a tight arrangement show, there were big areas where, I or Rick or Patrick or whoever would stretch out, quite a lot. So that was a joy. And Amit had a whole thing, it wasn't like you just got a person, you almost got kind of a well, the persona was very powerful. He was charming, he was knowledgeable, he was sort of very classy kind of guy. You felt like, wow, you could really kind of get a buzz from him, and he had a very suave way. So, but those things were just secondary to his skill to spot, the great artists that he did over the years, and help, with his brother, help to produce and bring forwards other producers to look after all the acts he had. I mean, he loved Led Zeppelin as well,
Genesis, Foreigner. I mean, they had the cream of the classic.
That's right. Yes, and our link with Amit was partly Phil Carson, who was, a lovely guy who was a record executive who looked after ES very closely and was a good friend of Chris's and all the guys. We all like Phil and helped us through the solo album period in the middle. But Amit was the real backbone. I remember when he came into, the usual story I tell is Tomato. He came in and heard Release. I think that's the last track on the first side, or
yeah.
He hears it and he says, I like this. He said, Steve, he says, is it all as good as this though? And I always found that question really intimidating because he was Amit. I mean, he trusted me, he came to me and he talked to me in the corner. And, so I didn't want to say, I didn't, but there again, I couldn't stop the enthusiasm flowing. So I said, I think so, Amit. I think we're onto something. And but that was Tomato, which was a pretty difficult record, I got to say. But I remember many of his visits, and actually one time he visited it after, or we were doing a record for Castle or Eagle or another label. He actually came in dressing room and said to me, "How come you're not doing this live album for Atlantic?" Or some such story. So he did have a level of, and rightly so. He did help discover Yes and had the wisdom to sign us. Besides the other greats that he did.
I want to ask you just a couple more questions about Yes, and then I want to talk to you a little bit about the Tomorrow reissue that you worked on.
Oh yeah.
So, is it true that you, for a while there before Quest and Mirror, didn't want the band to create and release a new album, and then all of a sudden you changed your mind?
Well, no, I wouldn't say that's exactly accurate. You could say that I was always, when people talked about, okay, shall we make a record? And I would say, right, but where's the material? Let's get, if we're serious, then let's start getting material ready for this. And somebody might say, well, I got this song, I got that song. And then I'd say, well, yeah, okay. But that does not make an album. We do need to get a quality material. So I guess I was quality controlling a bit. And maybe that was, maybe that meant that certainly by the time we transitioned into the Quest,
right,
that we had an idea where we were going. But when I said, look, I'd like to produce, and I'd like to use Curtis and his studio will be the main place, but I've recorded tracks here and you've got them over there. So I put the formula together. But if it had to work, and basically that's the responsibility of the producer. To find the solutions and keep the mood and the enthusiasm. The development. Keep that develop. I mean, if there was no development in the music, then you must be doing something really wrong. But that's how we kind of built along that road.
Now, I've asked this to, I think, the other four over the years, but I never had a chance to ask you.
Yeah.
About the big show during the bicentennial in Philadelphia, where 120,000 people, Frampton was opening and Gary Wright was on the bill. And I think it was the Poussette Dart Band might have been the original opener.
Right.
How did you feel about that? Because there's pictures out there now from the sky of the stadium, and it just looks unbelievable. So what are your memories of that show?
Well, I mean, at that point, we'd never done anything like, maybe since. There was an enormous event. There was that enormous event, and there was almost this, it was like a sea, of people. I know you can only use the same words that everybody else uses, but you get out on stage, it's like, sea of people. And there's all sorts of mad stuff going on. It was a little out of control, but I think we got on and played. I seem to remember that we usually flip nights with Peter. I don't know who, I can't remember who closed.
Yes, closed. Yes, closed.
Oh, yeah. I remember him coming off the stage and saying, it's a fantastic thing out there. You're going to love it to bits. And I said, great, Peter, thanks. Good one. And basically it was like that. It became a cornerstone of events, really. We've done Madison Square Gardens, many, many times.
Right.
But basically this was like ginormously big. It almost seems like it was runaway big. It was too big for itself. It couldn't hold itself quite together. I don't know how true that is, but I know there were people burning stuff up the back. for some reason or another. But it was a big and slightly dangerous, but also it was an event that everybody there won't forget, I guess. And I was there, and I have a preference for indoors. You know, as far as my ear tells me when I'm indoors, I can actually hear what I'm doing really, really well, and I can hear what everybody's doing. I can hear what even the audience. I can hear what they're doing. So to hear, you know, hear what's going on there was really, really exciting.
Okay. So let me talk to you about this Tomorrow album that's just been reissued. It's not really a reissue, it's a reimagined, right?
Yeah. Basically, I think the album was very it was a good opportunity. A good opportunity came with this album to make it better. That's all I saw. And that didn't involve total remixing or anything, because in fact My White Bicycle is very much the same. It has a little treatment that we gave it, but some of the other songs were dire in need. You know, they were screaming out to my ear, screaming out for, and along came some technology. It's called RX9, RX10 now, and that technology really allows you to look at well, we waited a whole year till we could locate the mono tapes, which really had not been used for any Tomorrow mastering for years. These stereo ones have been used, and they're really a problem when you listen to them. They were really awful. So I wanted to get the album back to something I knew was there somewhere. So once we got them with RX10, we were allowed to use you can do with guitar, bass, drums, and vocals. You can actually look at those, and you can take them out the track. You can do anything you want to them and then put them back in the track. They're kind of like, they become like a wonderful game, almost like a Rubik's Cube. You know, you can turn it around, but if you get it back to where it was before, then anything that didn't sound sufficiently good suddenly was comforted by the other sounds that were already there. So it's a remarkable thing. So basically, that was part of it. But the other thing was we brought all the tunes up to pitch. Some of them were running at below, and then my ear tells me tune will sound really dire if it's not at the right pitch. And also, Revolution was the biggest project on the whole album. And what happened there was that I glued the track back together at one tempo. It's at multi-tempos, and it goes up and down and roundabout, and we could do that. You know, you can fix all this stuff, so it's just great. I don't know that Giles Martin needed to do any of this with the Revolver release, because basically they had beautiful tracks and they were just going to, like, you know, freshen them up. But basically what I did was to actually fix, you know, some major problems, particularly with the pitch. And we could improve timing. We could, you know, if the bass was a bit out of tune somewhere, we'd take that off, put it in tune, and basically turn down a guitar that's too loud. You know, that was such a relief. You know, I don't particularly like to be too loud. I like to be at the right level. You know? Right. So we did those adjustments, and that's what the album consists of. Besides, I took off 3 tracks. You know, Auntie Mary's Dress Shop, blah blah blah. A few songs that were kind of light. They were kind of not really psychedelic band songs, but I replaced them with studio recordings, all studio recordings, until you get to the CD with the 2 live tracks on the end, which are from a show in 1967. So basically, before that, you've got all the tracks that are possible in mono, with repairs done to them to make them, and the running order tweaked, so to make it like a psychedelic group record. That was my goal.
So I think we've pretty much covered everything.
Yeah.
So I'm going to sort of end with, is there any kind of a definitive Yes documentary that's either in the works, or are you discussing? That's the big thing now. Obviously, these documentaries, I'm sure you've seen a lot of them. And I know you've done some things over the years, but there hasn't been a real definitive one.
Well, that's true. I would agree wholeheartedly. And I think that might be because there are problems with them. You know, when you look back at what people have said at some point, you know, I've seen some pretty disappointing things when I've looked back and thought, well, that. So what doth make a good documentary is the insight by the director to understand that this is something of value and he's approaching a certain way. So the last thing I want to see is me walking down Caledonian Road in London and I say to you, oh, that's my school. You know what I mean? I don't want to even want to show anybody that. I mean, why would I? I'm a musician. I started, playing the guitar. That's what's interesting. But I don't know if I've got the patience, to agree to a documentary because although I do interviews and I'm enjoying talking to you, Denny, I'm not actually built every day to get up and think I want to talk about myself. I mean, there is a limit to that. And when it's a key thing and you've got the video and everybody's filming, you kind of wonder really what they're hoping to get because reality television isn't real. Right. And nor is an interview that's kind of clammy or uncomfortable or set up, that you're supposed to reveal or so if somebody, I think it might be more interesting for somebody to invent their own storyline that addresses all the events in Yes's career. That would be amazing to think of. But I don't know how that would be possible. But I don't look forward to another round of this guy's going to talk to everybody and
In other words, not like a behind the music type where you tell.
No, I think I've really burned on that stuff. Yeah. I mean, I like doing interviews. We were talking one-to-one. I can see the point in this. It's really nice. But as far as deciding how to collaborate, as I said, what I'm thinking about really, let me get to the point, is the band, the way that Scorsese did the film, he took it seriously, he did that right. I've also seen a very good documentary of Robbie talking about the band that isn't that, So, but when you've got particular topics, it's kind of good. If you're trying to tell the whole story of a band, wow. I mean, I'd like to think that was possible. And maybe, maybe it is, but, and certainly I'd like it to be right. So that would be a reason somebody would say to me, well, if you want this to be right, perhaps you better be in it. But
well, if it comes up, just so you know, and you probably remember some of it, and I have a lot of video and a lot of audio, especially I would go to Lidditz a couple of times and interview you. So yeah. I've got that period covered. So when you do eventually get around to it, have somebody contact me. I got some great stuff.
Right, yeah, but so there we are. A historical thing, somebody might want to do that. And okay, then, Denny, that's great. That's all right. That's good. I will bear that in mind.
Well, Steve, I want to thank you for taking time because I know you don't usually give a lot of interviews, and I had to actually call Martin and say, it's me. I think Steve will say yes. I don't, and he got right back to me. He says, yes, Steve will talk to you. And I appreciate it very much. I'm living in Florida now, so I'm going to wait and see what dates you have, and I'll probably see you at one of the Florida shows.
Well, some of the shows we did down in Florida last year were some of our best shows. I came off saying, okay, I'm not a fan of Florida, to be honest. I mean, it's not my top state, but basically I was delighted that some of the shows we played were really exciting musically, and there was a great listening audience there. So I look forward to getting back. See you there.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Steve. Have a good day, and good luck with the tour.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Denny. Thank you, man. Bye. Good to see you. Okay. Take care. Be well.
That's my conversation with Steve Howe of Yes. I hope you liked what you heard. Tell your friends. We're available on all the usual platforms, wherever you get your podcasts. And we have a video version on YouTube as well. You can also sign up to our channel, and you'll be notified when a new episode is released. And of course, it's free, no charge. It's just a lot of rock and roll stories. By the way, the Rock Podcast is now the #1 podcast for classic rock. So thanks for listening. Find us at the website, therockpodcast.com. We have a Facebook page, and you can send your comments, questions, suggestions, contact me via email at hello@therockpodcast.com. That's hello@therockpodcast.com. I read it all, love hearing from you. Till next time, I'm Denny Somack, and for now, that's it.